Hey, this is Mr. Drogemeyer. Thanks for joining me for our Algebra 1 lesson videos. Today we are in Unit 8, looking at lessons 8 and 9, manipulating systems of equations. So we're going to look at how we can make changes to these equations so that we can better work with them to find our solutions to the systems. And especially this is going to prepare us for another method of solving these systems that we'll look at in our next lesson. So let's just jump in. The first question here says, what's the result of multiplying the first equation by 2 and then adding it to the second equation? And so really what they're asking here is, if I multiply everything in this first equation by 2, so really I'm multiplying both sides of that equation by 2, so I would distribute that 2 to every term here. 2 times negative 7x is negative 14x. 2 times 2y would be positive 4y. And then 2 times 14 would be 28. So we just multiplied that first equation by 2. And then they want to know, after doing that, what would I get if I add these two equations together? And so we're going to think about just adding these. We can add down here because we have like terms in each spot. Negative 14x plus 3x. And so I'm just going to put a plus here to say we're adding everything here. 14x plus 3x, that would be a negative 11x. Positive 4y, if I add a negative 4y, those y's are going to zero out, aren't they? And then 28 plus 5 is going to give me 33. And so when I add those two equations together after that multiplication by 2 that I did, I get negative 11x equals 33. Well, notice that by multiplying that first equation by 2, that allowed us to zero out one of those variables. And so that's going to be something that will be helpful as we look um, to this going forward. So the next one we have here asks, what number must you multiply the first equation by so that the sum of the x coefficients is 0? So our x term, remember, coefficient is the number in front of that variable. And so they want to know, what would I multiply that first equation by so that when I add those two equations together, that those x coefficients sum to 0? Well, right now, this equation has a coefficient of 2 with the x. And so if I want to add these together and get them to 0, I would need this one to be negative 2. So I'm going to multiply that first equation by negative 2. So negative 2 times x would be negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative y would be positive 2y. And then negative 2 times 3 would be negative 6. And so then now if I was adding these equations together, notice that when I add negative 2x and positive 2x, it's going to zero out that x variable for me. All right, and then our last one here just asks us, what are some ways that we could eliminate a variable from this system of equations? So thinking about, what could I maybe multiply one of these equations by? Well, if you look, I have a positive 9y, a negative 3y here. If I multiply that second equation by 3, notice this would become positive 12x. This would be negative 9y. And so then when I add those together, the y would eliminate. I could look at the x values. That's going to be a little bit trickier. This I could do in one step. With this one, I can't. I would have to multiply by a fraction here in order to do that in one step here, and that's probably not going to be helpful in the long run for me. But what I could do is I could multiply that first equation by 4, which would make that 20x, and then also multiply the second equation by -5, which would make this -20x. So that would be a possibility, but there I'm having to multiply both equations by something to get there. So this would certainly be the easiest way for me to get rid of one of those coefficients with the variable, or eliminate one of those variables. All right, and that's all I've got for you today on this one. Appreciate you taking the time to watch. As always, let us know if you have questions. Thanks. Have a great day.